If you know me, you know that I've been playing Mario games for a very long time. Like many kids my age, he was one of my favorite fictional characters ever, being out Thomas the Tank Engine and Dora. I know, super intense competition. But the point being, I really like Mario. Probably a bit more than most people. But being completely honest, I don't really have a clue as to where I should start while talking about him and his adventures. I mean, geez, you got the 2D stuff, the 3D stuff, the 3D that plays like a 2D stuff, the new 2D stuff, the RPG stuff, the paper RPG stuff, the kart racing stuff, the sports stuff, the aggressively mid stuff. Like, there's just too much stuff. I've wanted to talk about this series for some time now. And while I have made Mario content in the past, 1, they were only really about the spin-offs, and 2, they weren't very good. But thinking about the bigger picture and taking into consideration just how influential the series used to be in the gaming landscape, I think that there's really only one clear place to start. So, Super Mario 64, Super Mario Sunshine, and Super Mario Odyssey are, according to Nintendo, the Sandbox Mario Triangle. It's not exactly an exaggeration to say that these are the games that, for a time, shaped how not only platformers, but games in general functioned in 3D. Is any of that new information to you? Well, obviously not. But what is, however, is how all of these games relate to me and my gaming life. 2012 was the year that I played Mario 64 for the first time via the version on the DS, and I didn't remember getting very far in it solely because you had to unlock Mario in Mario 64 DS. I know, disappointing. Fast forward a few years, then I, at the ripe age of 13, went out and bought a used Nintendo GameCube with a copy of Mario Sunshine, and again, I didn't remember getting very far because I just got bored. I know, disappointing. 2017 was the year that Mario Odyssey was revealed to the world, and upon seeing it for the first time, I was absolutely ecstatic, despite the fact that I didn't have a Switch and wouldn't get one for another year. But eventually I would finally obtain both a year later. I played it, I enjoyed it, I replayed it, I enjoyed it even more, I replayed it, I enjoyed it, but slightly less, and then I just kinda moved on from it. I know, disappointing. So why am I telling you all that when 66% of these games I have little to no nostalgic reverence for? To be honest, I have no idea. But I have been playing each of these games a lot recently, just in my own time. And honestly, I've just been having a blast replaying them, man. I know nowadays these games are kinda controversial for vastly different reasons, but I found myself rather impressed by not necessarily how well these games have aged, but more so how well certain aspects of them have held up. I believe that for as flawed as all of them are, there are 3 elements to each of these games that I absolutely adore and even go as far to say are timeless. Might get a little pushback on that last one, but we'll worry about that later. Anyways, probably the biggest thing that I found myself admiring about these games was just how well they nailed Mario's movement. Obviously, each of them do have their own control quirks, and for some, I may or may not be using enhanced versions of them to get rid of some of those quirks, but the point being, it's fun to play as Mario in every single one of these games. Mario games have always lived and died based off of their controls, at least for me personally. Even above level design and power-ups and all that, I found that if it isn't fun to move around as Mario, then the less likely I am to go back to it. Good news is, pretty much every Mario game that I care about features at the very least satisfactory controls. And in the case of 64 and Odyssey especially, they really hit it out of the park. I find that both games pretty much perfected the feeling of Mario. He has actual weight to him. He runs at the perfect speed. He feels just floaty enough to land on enemies without losing complete control. And probably the most important, he has a whole new arsenal of moves at his disposal. Remember, I grew up with the DS version of 64, the one that I didn't get very far in, So to discover that Mario could punch and kick and do all these backflips and somersaults and breakdance, like at the time, it completely blew my mind. But what blows my mind about all these moves now is just how immensely satisfying it is to chain them together. Because when you do, Mario 64 becomes a game about rhythm, flow, and momentum more than it is a game about platforming. To me, this is where a lot of the replayability comes from. Skillfully hopping and bopping my way around these levels, chaining all these moves together, potentially skipping some hazards in the process, and obtaining the star as quick and seamless as I can. But the thing that really impresses me about this is that this is one of the first 3D games ever. And the fact that they made Mario this much fun to play on their first go is just mind-boggling. So, good on you, 1996 Nintendo. Jumping over to Super Mario Odyssey, Mario's move pool is largely unchanged, but he does obtain one move that changes everything: Cappy. By throwing Cappy, Mario pretty much gets a glorified ranged attack, but said glorified ranged attack could also be used to further extend the reach of Mario's moves, allowing you to chain together moves like never before. It is really hard to describe just how satisfying it is to use Cappy to perform all these incredible feats, and making it even better is that Mario's movement is just inherently a lot more fluid. I did kind of lie earlier. Mario does gain one other new move, that being rolling, and jumping out of a roll makes you do a long jump, and then you could triple jump to keep up the momentum, and then dive to go just that tiny bit further, and then go back into a roll to keep that streak going. God, like just describing this to you feels so satisfying. Kinda makes me want to go and play that game again, to be honest. I know what I'm doing after I'm done. Sunshine goes about its movement a tad bit differently. For one, Mario now has a big old water jetpack attached to his back, known as Flood. And the more I think about it, Flood and Cappy are actually very similar, with Flood also being a glorified ranged attack that can be used to extend the range of Mario's moves. The difference this time around is that Mario's moves aren't as fluid as in the other games. Fluid. Flood uses different nozzles, all of which being used at specific points in a level, and in general, Mario's movement has been noticeably tightened up, being a lot more precise and on the nose, for lack of a better term. All of these things probably do explain why Mario Sunshine isn't really a game about flow or rhythm, and is absolutely a game that emphasizes more of that traditional platforming. Now, I am not saying this at all to devalue Sunshine. If anything, the more precise controls and the ability to use Flood makes Mario probably the most agile he has ever been, and most of the time, the extra agility is used in super creative ways. Overall, while I do have a preference for how I think Mario should feel in 3D, all of these games manage to make moving around as Mario and playing as Mario just super fun, and they do so in their own special way. But speaking of special, these games are known for having some of the most recognizable areas within the series. But what really caught my eye this go around was how well each of these areas are linked together, albeit in very subtle ways. So let's start with the least subtle example, Super Mario Sunshine. Sunshine does not make a single attempt to hide its theme from you. Summer, water, beaches, they're all over the place. But the way that Sunshine stretches this theme to get the absolute most out of every location is just plain beautiful. You traverse through incredibly busy harbors, a beachside hotel, this whole giant friggin' water park, among many other places, and all of which are being unified by that consistent theme of summer. I don't know, maybe it's just the way they look, or maybe it's just the old 2002 graphics that they got going on here, but you can absolutely tell that all of these areas belong together. These all feel like areas that can exist within the same space. And the more that I played through Sunshine, the more I began to realize and appreciate that fact. Just ignore the black skyboxes. My GameCube has kind of been acting up. I also think that Odyssey does a fantastic job with its world building. I mean, it'd be weird if it didn't. You are quite literally traveling around the entire world to collect those moons, And I'm happy to say that each of these areas feel alive. None of these different kingdoms look the same, but it is still very easy to believe that they all could exist on the same planet. Each area has an in-universe name that they go by. They all feature different civilians who are just kind of roaming around and going about their everyday life. Hell, a select few of them even have actual attractions and vacation spots that give people an actual reason to want to go there. To be honest, this was probably the thing that I was able to admire the most on this playthrough of Odyssey, because a lot of these things I didn't really care to pay attention to. But like Sunshine, it just makes the world of Mario Odyssey feel more complete and connected. And that's just something we all love to see. But you, on the other hand, you upset me. While not terrible by any means, 64's world building is far and away the weakest of the three, which, again, is totally understandable given how old it is. The levels in the game don't really feel connected, and oftentimes they're also just suspended in midair, so that helps things. Obviously, this is due to the levels being paintings found in Peach's castle. So actually, I guess in that aspect they are kinda unified, albeit in a very subtle way. But speaking of the castle walls, I feel like that is where 64 is the strongest in terms of all this. Peach's castle is the only real area in the game that actually feels interconnected. And the biggest reason why I say that is honestly thanks to all the secrets hidden within it. So many of them reveal hidden areas within the castle, and many of these areas make total sense to be there given where they're located. Actually, thinking about it now, even a few of the main stages do something similar and have secrets within them. Admittedly, these ones aren't that hard to find, but at least it's something. Again, 64's approach is a lot more subtle than the others, but I can confidently say that each of these games managed to make their worlds more immersive thanks to their world building. They all have their own unique atmosphere and vibe to them, which is probably why all these areas are so recognizable and memorable to so many people. But honestly, I don't really feel like that amounts to much without... Admittedly, this is kind of piggybacking off of the previous section. People often bring up charm whenever talking about something that they love. And in general, that has always been a big part of Mario, at least for me. And when replaying these three games, it has become crystal clear to me how much personality all of these games have. And I mean, you can't get more personal than playing around with Mario's mug. Or at least, attempting to. What was once a technical showcase for a console is now more a place to just goof off in, which stands in contrast to just how imaginative the entire game is. Again, like, you're hopping through paintings, you're jumping into holes in the wall, you're killing off your retinas to fly around in the sky, you're jumping into I don't even wanna know what to go and explore a cave. I know half of these are completely ridiculous, but that's entirely the point. Mario 64 is a game that puts creativity and fun over cohesion and making sense. And at least to me, aside from it being the first of its kind, that has always and will always be what I remember it for. Just like how I remember Sunshine for... yeah, that. I think most people can agree that Sunshine is not a perfect video game. But even still, I feel like the reason why many people, myself included, still have so much affection for it is just cause the game is just so happy. I know that's a very weird way to describe something, but there's just so much vibrancy and joy beaming all throughout Isle Delfino. There's a whole pipe system hidden underground, there's a bunch of really creative entrances to the secret course levels, which I suck at. Even the simple fact that you're collecting shines this time around instead of stars makes the entire adventure feel like it has an actual purpose. Sunshine just has so many little details that are just so easy to love, which is probably why people love it, to be fair. But moving over to Odyssey, with a game like this, I honestly have no idea to start with its details. So let's start with the fact that this Mario game not only has one, but two outstanding vocal performances from Pauline, Mayor Pauline. Sorry. I just love the fact that these songs are here because, again, It just adds character and makes the whole experience feel alive. Like Sunshine, everyone and everything is just so cheery and joyful, and it too also has its own unique collectible, which helps with the whole unifying the game world thing. But like 64, this game isn't afraid to go off the rails because 6-year-old spoiler warning. You fight that thing in a Mario game. You can't possibly get more over the top than that, right? Well, except for... Yeah, you can also do that in this game. It's pretty cool, right? Well, granted, it's not as cool as...
Hey, Mario? Yes!
Like, look at this, man. Is this not the most insane thing you've ever seen? But I mean, that's absolutely nothing in comparison to... No, that's it. That's it. I don't got anything else cool to show you. Getting back on track, Odyssey is just filled with all these awesome and impactful moments. Moments that stick with you long after you beat the game for the first time. They're flashy, they're flamboyant, they're aggressively in your face, and they just make this adventure feel like the grandest and most legendary adventure Mario has ever been on. And the fact that you could even make those arguments and have those feelings from this game is truly, truly special. Guys, I wanna be honest, I love these games. I always have, I always will. And when thinking about why that is, it always comes back to those 3 points. And again, on the topic of being honest, I just feel like if you disregard everything else about them, these are the 3 things that if you take away, I genuinely don't think that I would like as much. In my eyes, those are the things that define Sandbox Mario. You don't have to be a fan of all of them. You don't even have to agree with the aspects that I like about them. But when it's all said and done, thinking about Sandbox Mario has made me have an even bigger appreciation for 3 of some of the most legendary platformers of all time. However, with all of that being said, Galaxy 1 still solos all 3.